So we're here today to discuss looking at how the situation is changing for Hollywood and for international production, or maybe it's not. We're going to discuss that. The title is With the Emergence of European and International Production Hubs and Incentives, Is Hollywood Still Relevant? We're looking at the fact that, despite the fact that LA has some of the most sophisticated infrastructure and experienced talent in the entertainment business and is known as the entertainment capital of the world, shooting costs and the pandemic, the strikes, the fires have put a dent in LA's shine as a place to go and shoot. And we're going to look at that, what that means in terms of raising finance or actually shooting there. And we're seeing producers, American talent coming to Europe, looking to the Middle East for money, and we're going to be discussing that. As I said to you in my notes, I find it quite interesting because I did covered a similar panel in Italy in June, where Gary Lucchese, who was Lionsgate president, and they were all talking waxing lyrical about the studio and being on the studio, and a bit like the studio that we see in Seth Rogen's The Studio. And they were missing it and saying that LA was at a crossroads, and maybe everything was just going to disappear. So to start with, I'd just like to get from Rena and Sarah your opinion. You're both based in LA, and I'd like to. Is Hollywood dying?
It's not dying. I mean, I think it's evolved. I think that our world has become more global, but it certainly has not died. It's very relevant, and it's still the hub of talent, and as we mentioned, studios and streamers who are global distributors. Their strategies of release, it all is in LA still. That's where their headquarters are, but certainly based on probably the tax incentives and regional funding that exists overseas, there's been a little bit more of a shift in shooting overseas. That's not new, though. We've seen that before, whether it's films that were shot in New Zealand, Game of Thrones, just tons of films that have not been shot in the U.S. before because it made sense, either creatively or financially. So I would say it's still alive. It's just shifting and pivoting.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think if you're not pivoting with it, then and you're wishing and hoping that everything goes back to the way that it was, 20 or 30 years ago, then I think ultimately you'll be disappointed. But our whole job in what we do is to try and figure out solutions for puzzles in putting movies together. And I think roughly half of U.S. films are shot overseas, and I think that we have a lot of work to do in the U.S. to bring production back to the U.S. And I guess we'll see what happens with what Newsom's done in California, because obviously that's a huge effort. I think it's $750 million that he's reinstated, and I have one movie that's shooting right now, or is supposed to be shooting in the fall in L.A. And I have to say the process of getting through the sort of tax board and dealing with all of that has been relatively seamless compared to, over the last couple of years. So I think we're hopeful that we're going to be able to shoot more in the U.S., but also excited to be shooting elsewhere.
And Vincent, as someone who grew up in France, first of all, we could have knew you as selling and putting together productions for international art house directors, and then you sort of reached out to LA. You started financing bigger productions. You set up the Veterans, and initially it was the Insiders, and then it was Mad River. What's your sense? I mean, do you still? We were discussing this before. You were saying, "What's Hollywood?" I mean, when I say "What's Hollywood," your reaction was? Is it?
Yeah. And when we moved to LA to do Insiders, that became Veterans, it was more to access talents and financing. There is a big difference between the way the films are financed in Europe, or let's say in the rest of the world, and the way they are financed in in the US. And we, when we were selling on the same slate at Wild Bunch, American film financed by equity people and films financed by us or some other traditional cinema investors in Europe, it was somewhere not compatible. So we decided to do a company in the US to sell for third parties or to put together films for third parties, because the way the financing is working in the US, you do a film and the market somewhere needs to cover 100% of the cost of the film. There are some tax credit, regional tax credit, but it's mainly the market which is going to finance the film. So some people are investing against the market. Traditionally, historically, when I started, it was distributors like New Line, Miramax, whatever. It became some private investors, and little by little, it became something financially much more complex that you have to deal with. And it's very different from Europe, where it's a combination of soft money, TV obligation, theatrical distributors, international sales companies, but there was very little private money, and the way to work is very different on the European finance film and the American film. When we decided to do a structure in LA, that year we had Snowden, the Oliver Stone film, in the same slate than Cousteau, which was a French film, or History of Love. And we were on one film selling for a third party, so we couldn't take our own decision. We needed to report on a daily basis. It's a different work. We were not equipped to do that. And when you sell your own film, first you can wait. You can wait to sell on a promo reel, which is always a better situation because you have footage on a completed basis. While when you sell for someone else, you need to put together the financing in 5 days. So we decided to move because it was just a different way of doing. And of course, because we wanted to access Hollywood talents. And most of those, I would say, at that time, it changed, but at that time, I would say that 90% of private money, private investors for cinema were in Hollywood. So that's why we decided to have two companies doing two different jobs. Of course, all that has changed tremendously. And that's why I say, what is exactly Hollywood? Because it's a different, for me, it's a different, I would say, observation if it's the number of shooting, the nationality of money, of investors, the distribution, in what is the US portion of money in a budget for a worldwide exploitation. That has changed. The fact that Hollywood was global, which is very different today. I mean, when you look at the opening of the Paul Thomas Anderson film, which is a masterpiece, and you look at the numbers, and the week before you have a Japanese anime film doing 5 times more, you say something has changed. Not only it has changed in the taste, it has changed in the desire of the audience. So all that, of course, evolved since we created veterans. We need to adapt. I agree with you. I think it's more that we have more solutions than before, than any problem. So Hollywood will still survive, it's still there, and they are still shooting a lot of TV series, film there. It's just that suddenly for those people, the number of solutions is bigger.
But the original origins of Hollywood were the light and people shooting there. And if production doesn't come back in a big way, like you're suggesting might happen with the new tax incentives that Newsom announced or were passed, I think, before the summer, could you see it leaching away? Because that was what brought the film people to LA in the first place. Or am I being too sort of kind of cataclysmic? Am I thinking? Because the actors won't. If there's no work there, they don't need to live there. If there's no productions for the technicians to work on that, they won't live there. So it kind of changes the complexion of the city. Sarah,
yeah, I mean, I think, geez, gosh, so depressing.
Sorry.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone sees a complete disappearance of production in California. I think it's going to get better, honestly. Like Rena said, there's still all the studios. I think there's a desire. Obviously, it depends on what the content is about, right? And there are certain films and television where they just simply have to be shot in a certain place, right? So I think people will always go to the locations that make the most sense for that particular production. And it may be that crew is moving to Georgia and Louisiana and New Jersey and to get jobs, obviously, in certain instances. But I think we all feel collectively, and I'm speaking for everyone in Hollywood. No, I think we all feel collectively that we want to be doing as much as we can, in the U.S. And I think we also acknowledge that there needs to be more of a desire from each and every state, and sadly there isn't that federalized tax system, so it's incumbent upon everybody and throughout the country, and it's a pretty high task. But no, I don't think anyone feels like all of a sudden we're going to wake up one day and no one's shooting in Hollywood, no one's shooting in New York, no one's shooting in New Jersey. I just think that people, again, it's like, if they can go to Hungary, if they can go to Budapest, if they can go to Munich and make a movie for $120 million gross that they couldn't make for more than 50 in the U.S., obviously that's going to be enticing to them.
So to Rena, to sort of not to ask you the same question, but do you think like the politics, like Trump, everybody's sort of hair were turned white before Cannes when he said we've got to bring the movie industry back to the US. Do you think that people will kind of be listening to that though, and in the States, and bringing films back because of they fear that Trump, there could be other things that could happen to them, or not?
Oh boy. Look, I think to Sarah's point, you make a film where it makes sense financially. I know in our business, the way we have to put films together, we have to look at all options. And if you can make, and I think one of your questions before was, if you get $10 million to shoot in Hungary or $10 million in the US, where do you go? Well, where does that $10 million, what does it get you? Which is what Sarah said. If it gets you more days in Hungary, a filmmaker may want more days. So that's something we have to look at. For me, the biggest issue is the federal. Not having that, we can't compete necessarily with what governments in Germany, France, Spain, what they're providing. That's the biggest issue. But people want to shoot here. If the film is set in Los Angeles, our goal is to figure out a way to shoot the film in Los Angeles. And that might mean we look at the budget and we look at the numbers and the value all over the world, and we say, okay, here's where your budget has to be. And if you can get, and you really want to try to get that tax incentive. And that becomes really the challenge, and it's what we do on a day-to-day basis. But I don't think it's for lack of desire to shoot here.
So to bring you in, Abdul, you're like one of the, Saudi Arabia is one of the newest kids on the block in terms of trying to get productions to come and shoot in their country and offering an incentive. Could you just recap, because there's been quite a few changes over the years in terms of what Saudi offers in terms of an incentive. Can you just recap on what you're doing right now?
Well, the film industry in Saudi is quite young. The Film Commission was established in February of 2020. Great timing before the pandemic. So we were actually experiencing what the whole world has been going through. The post-pandemic inflation, AI, the competition with streaming, reduction on production budgets. But our perspective back then was different from everyone else around the world. Everyone else was kind of trying to navigate their way from there, because they have a huge legacy to deal with and they just wanted to know the way forward. Our perspective was that we are going to build things from the ground up. So we kind of were lucky and privileged to have a fresh slate and a fresh paper to really build things from there onward. We established our incentive program. We believe that incentivizing production internationally and locally is a great tool to empower more films to be made in the country. So we launched the incentive program in Cannes of 2022. So the program itself is young, and it offers up to 40% cash rebate for international productions as well as local productions. But we all know that all the factors that has been influencing the film industry around the world is putting pressure in everyone. So we are part of that as well. Lots of films were actually planning to shoot in the US, but we had strikes, so they kind of postponed that. We know that the inflation is catching up with a lot of studios, so they're kind of reducing and now revising their budget plans. AI and technology is also a factor. But as a result of our incentive program, we have seen a great response. Big titles were shot entirely in Saudi Arabia, like Kandahar and Desert Warrior, which is going to be premiered here in Zurich Film Festival. We have also had partial production that were shot, K-pop by Wes Anderson, Into the Grey by Guy Ritchie, Paper Empire. But I think the most positive impact was our local productions, because our incentive program is offered equally for international and locals. We have seen a spike of local productions being shot in the country, which in its turn had a very good presence in international film festivals as well as in the box office. But there is a lot to do at that front. We really need to improve. We need to catch up with the changing dynamics of the industry around the world, to tune the program to serve the industry better, locally for our local industry as well as internationals.
So are you looking at what's going in Hollywood? I mean, when you first announced the opening up of Saudi, it was all about we're going to get action movies and get these big productions to come over. But are you looking at what's happening in Hollywood? I mean, one of the things I think is noticeable when I've gone to the Red Sea Film Festival, which I know you're not involved in, is it's not so focused on Europe or so focused on it's the States. They like to have the States, but it's like really focused on Asia as well. I mean, do you think that you'll be looking to like those markets as well to get those filmmakers to come over and shoot rather than focusing purely on Hollywood?
We are not focused only on Hollywood. We're focusing all over the world. In fact, we have had Bollywood production that also were shot in Saudi. Donkey, starring Shah Rukh Khan, did come to Saudi, and they shot for, I think, 14 days. So, our philosophy here is to build the film industry, a modern film industry that is going to be meaningful to as many production as possible, and to make our country as a hub for international filmmaking. Now, Hollywood obviously is one of the biggest, capital. It's basically the capital of filmmaking in the world, and we would love to work with as many titles as possible and as many studios as possible from Hollywood. But at the same time, we're also mindful that there are also independent filmmaking happening in Europe and also in the US, and there are also, emerging industries from Asia. So we are willing to work with all of them, because we believe that we have all the ingredients to build in, a sustainable and a competitive film industry. So the best strategy forward is to really be open to everyone, including Hollywood. And obviously, if the right film coming from Hollywood and find that the location in Saudi Arabia and the incentives we have and the studios and the infrastructure is right for them, obviously we would work with them closely to make that film happen.
So I'm sorry, Vincent and Sarah, sorry to put you on the spot again, but I mean, I know you've both been to Saudi because I've seen you at the Red Sea Film Festival. Either of you, Rena, were you there as well? I didn't know. But did you, when you went there, did you think maybe somewhere we could like do on our packages, there's an element we could bring in here, or is it still too early days for you? Sarah? Or Vincent, whoever first.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was sort of there as a fact-finding mission because I had never been there before. It was the first time, and I had wanted to go for a really long time. And I certainly, because we're at an agency and our talent is always wondering about what's happening in Saudi, I wanted first and foremost to be able to speak to what was going on there. And what was so striking and exciting to me was that because it's newer and burgeoning as a film industry, there was so much optimism, and it felt like something really exciting was happening there. I also think that it's it's a huge opportunity for neighboring countries and the rest of the region in the Middle East too, for there to be partnerships, with them. I think in terms of like American film production, obviously there are the examples that were just noted, but I think the question is sort of how those incentives are working and like how the banks are going to be working with those incentives overseas and what that ultimately looks like. And I think there's a lot of unanswered questions in terms of like how much more massive it's going to become in terms of bringing American film production over there. But it's really exciting what's happening, especially on the local front.
I've been twice to the Red Sea. I'm amazed by the feeling I have that they want to build the Hollywood of the South Hemisphere. Is that they are not really looking at Hollywood. That was my feeling. And the way through the foundation they develop the local industry and they develop not only the Middle East industry, but African cinema, Asian cinema, you can see that they want to be a kind of a Hollywood of that region. We visited 2 studios and a bit to know what are the opportunities. We are thinking about 1 TV series that we could do there. We were also thinking about 1 film we want to do where we are finding solution where shooting there could be a good opportunity. It's like I said before, it's 1 more solution, and you cannot do everything there. You just need to see who are the technicians, who are the skill of the crew, and they attracted a lot of Lebanese people I knew are now working there, and they're experienced because they've done films before. So it's a new opportunity for us. And what I like, and when we to come back to the Hollywood position, what happened is that in many regions of the world, they developed shooting facilities which are now at the level of Hollywood. And it's not a bad news to think that everywhere they develop their local cinema and they develop their local industry. And it's just 1 more opportunity or 1 more solution than something competing to steal shooting from Hollywood. And what I was impressed when I was in Red Sea is how they became a very important location, a very important opportunity for all the region where they were doing much less films before. So they are really developing. When you look at the top 20 films of the box office in Saudi Arabia, 8 of them are from Middle East, which is something that was not happening before. It was all Hollywood. Now everywhere in the world they develop their own industry, their own cinematography, and it's just more opportunities, more solution for people like us who are always looking for solution to make films possible.
One last question sort of related to Saudi, and then I wanted to go on to like the role of talent in all of this. But you were suggesting to me that the box office there is off the scale now. You said you had a figure. What was it?
Well, if I can just give you sort of a perspective of where our box office stands. Before 2018, Saudi was infamous for not having any cinema theaters. We did not have any screens in the country at all. Our first box office launch was in April of 2018. If you fast forward today, we have over 640 screens reaching 20 cities. And our box office has sold more than 90 million tickets, generating around $1.3 billion, all done in the span of 7 years. And we are the #1 box office in the Middle East. So this growth has happened in a time where the whole world is basically debating whether streaming is going to be relevant and taking over traditional theatrical experience. It's also happened at the time when a lot of content has been produced by streaming giants, and they are directly going to streaming and skipping the theatrical experience. So we also, felt that we needed to really push the boundary here and create, a new box office. But I think the figure that we're most proud of, and this is probably what I was referring to, is that our share, our local content of this box office has been prominent. And I was really trying just at the beginning of this to imagine what we would actually have in terms of share of this box office. As of last week, and just talking about 2025, we had this year 13 Saudi titles in box office, out of 395 total since the beginning of 2025 until today. They amount for a share of 3.2% of total films, but their revenue is, they take actually 16.7% of total revenue. So it's really small percentage of our local films taking almost 20% of all revenue. It's a testament that the local industry has been developing very fast. The trust from the local audience has been increasing. And at the same time, the incentive program we have introduced, and also we have other programs, financial aid, which is investment funds, and we have also grants to support independent filmmakers. So all of these programs together has been really, having a positive effect on our box office. And back to your point of, the top 20 films being also from local, not only from American, our box office has grown to be organically diverse throughout, the recent years. If you look, for example, this year specifically at the top 10 films, in any given week in Saudi Arabia, you would see at least 3 to 5 films from different nationalities. You will see American films, Egyptian, Indian, Saudi, and actually the last 2 weeks we have in top 10 Demon Slayer, which is a Japanese animation in top 10. So it's a very diverse market. It's a testament that the audience in Saudi are very well, open. They don't mind subtitles. We are okay with it, whether it's American or any from other nationalities. So this diversity is really exciting for us because we think there is an opportunity for also independent films to come in and distribute in Saudi. I can also recall another incident or another experience. I think it was 5 or 6 months ago, the re-release of Seven in their 30th year anniversary. I think they did another theatrical release. And when I've heard the news, I was really just thinking, Seven, which is the famous film by David Fincher. They did another theatrical release to celebrate the 30 years anniversary. And I thought that was really great news. And then surprisingly, the week after, it's number 4 in top 10. Wow. And it stayed there in top 10 for 2 weeks. So that means that people are willing to go in and watch a film that is 30 years old and experience it in theater and go in enough admissions to make it in top 10. So that is something that we're really excited about.
So the reason I wanted that information was because I wanted to understand from you three, when you're talking about how Paul Thomas Anderson hasn't gone crazy in the US, but yet, and is that going to impact how you're thinking when you're putting projects together? Are you going to start taking territories like Saudi into account because they're these huge box office territories now, or are you going to see yourself pivoting over more to streaming so it's not an issue? I don't know, Rena, just to get you into the conversation.
We don't pivot to, we're always, we work in the film business. We are big supporters of theatrical experience. That's not to say we don't work with the streamers as well. Yeah. I think there's room for both, but we're in the business of keeping the theatrical world alive. And so the question for us is always, what is it that we have to do? And again, the solutions. What are the solutions? What are the stories? How do you get people into the audience? It's wonderful to hear what's going on in a new country, discovering cinema, and that it's working. We're struggling in the United States, and I would say it's really because, we talk about this at lunch, COVID really was what cramped our business, and it sort of pushed forward the streaming industry. And so we've been, and then, obviously double strikes, we had a lot going on. So we're really just slowly starting to see some great successes, and we're starting to analyze what are the films that are actually making the noise? What are the films that are that people are going to, attending from the independent side as well as the bigger studio side. So it's a constant, struggle to figure out, because we work at an agency and we work with enormous number of writers, directors, talent, very talented individuals, and there are a lot of stories to be told. So it's about which films are the ones that can be made for this budget and which ones are going to be very difficult in the marketplace because of the marketplace. And so do we not want to get those stories told? No, we want to be realistic about how they can be made. And that's the big question, and we're constantly trying to figure out the solution of, do you make a film, and we were talking about this earlier, for $2 million in the US with no tax deal because the numbers add up? Or do you make that $10 million film overseas because the numbers don't add up? And so it's a constant struggle of trying to figure out what it is and how we value the United States market today.
Because that was your value in the United States market. And what I was also suggesting is, if you have these big markets like Saudi coming up with these big box offices, can you envisage a point that's going to sort of make you think differently about projects, or even think about different types of projects?
Well, we're always relying on international. And that would be something, we're always relying on the international value of a film, and hopefully they take into consideration, markets like Saudi.
I also think that there's like an increasingly larger desire to be investing in local language film. It's, you look at companies like Neon, and you see what they're doing. You see how competitive the market is for international films. It's never been this. It's like one of the most competitive categories in the Oscars. presently. And so I think that that's a huge shift. But it's not because, and also, I think we also have to acknowledge that in the U.S. it's still like a $10 or $11 billion business theatrically. So it's not like all of a sudden we've woken up and there's no theatrical business. You look at movies like Conclave, you look at movies like the Walter Salles movie last year, you look at Honora, you look at so many films that were just like massive theatrical hits over the last couple of years. And to Rena's point, you wake up, there's COVID, there's there are the 2 strikes, the fires, there have been a lot of setbacks, and a lot of changes politically and, globally across the world. And so I think we're all just trying to figure out like how are we spending our time so that we can be investing in the things that are new. It would be really boring if everybody was just making the same movie over and over again. And I think we're living in a time where people are going to be forced to be as crafty as possible, and that's when the best art comes to the forefront.
I mean, the next thing I wanted to ask was talent, because when I listened to this panel back in June, one of the things they were saying, you've got to get your actors to us to have their films in LA. But we are seeing sort of talent coming over to Europe. I mean, you've just had Richard Linklater in Nouvelle Vague, which you were working with, Jodie Foster in A Vie Private Life. We saw Angelina Jolie in Couture.
Mm-hmm.
So is that just a blip? Is that just by chance? Or are you seeing Hollywood stars that we associate with Hollywood wanting to work in Europe more for different reasons? Maybe for finance, maybe for political reasons. I don't know.
Well, Couture was set in Paris, so
yes,
she had
fair
to
enough,
go.
fair enough.
So
but the fact that she wanted to come over and do that, that role is quite interesting.
Yeah. The film was interesting and important to her, so yes. Yeah, and talent travels. I mean, Anthony Hopkins travels, and I think actors don't mind traveling. It's really about, again, it comes down to the script, the story. Is it of interest? And where is it going to shoot is something that does come up, and if you can accommodate them in the way that makes them comfortable, they will. And are there some actors that want to shoot still in Los Angeles because of personal reasons, family, don't want to travel? That happens too. And our job is to figure out, again, how to accommodate and how to, from an independent point of view, I'm talking about what we do, is how to figure out the ways to get the film made by accommodating the talent as well.
Yeah, I think the talent is definitely used to traveling and being malleable. I think in the case of A Private Life, Rebecca Zlotowski's movie, she, in case nobody knows what that is, Jodie Foster, who is completely bilingual and did the role entirely in French, moved to France, and it was just an opportunity for her to have that experience and work with a French filmmaker and work in France. And I think it was really exciting for her and something that she wants to continue to do. So, and then, it's like, I think the biggest thing, and to Rena's point, is that like, if somebody is passionate enough to go to, travel across the world and go and spend 3 months in Australia when they're from Los Angeles or they're living in New York or whatever it is, they'll do that because it's a priority for them because they care about what they're doing.
And Vince, I mean, I know you're traveling between Paris or France and LA, but are you getting more interest from Hollywood talents who want to come and work in Europe, or?
I think there is, but I think it was always the case. The first film I ever worked on was Arizona Dream, which was Emir Kusturica with Johnny Depp, Faye Dunaway. So I think the talent are looking for good stories and good talent to work with. We just finished the Christian Mungiu film, and we have Sebastian Stan, who's American but with Romanian roots, and we have Renate, I never know how to pronounce the rest of the name, but I call her Renate, it's fine, she's happy with it, and she's Norwegian, and the film is somewhere because the story tells the story of a Romanian family in Norway, and sometimes they speak in English, sometimes in Norwegian. It's not, I don't think it's, I think it's the story that lead the way the talent travel or want to work with a director. Jodie Foster, she wanted to work with Rebecca, they met and they wanted to work together. The Nouvelle Vague, it's a Linklater story. He's the one who wanted to do a movie, don't ask me why, about the shooting of Breathless. And he looked for a French crew, a French producer. So it was not initiated. It was not initiated by a French, by the French industry. It's just the story was there, and he wanted to shoot Paris in the 60s. So it's every time I think the story and the talent are the one leading. I just think it's easier to travel today, and it's easier to find accommodation everywhere in the world, because you have a nice hotel everywhere, you have the studio developed their accommodation everywhere. So I think it's just easier than before to do a film far from home. You can go back during the weekend. I think it's just the progress, technological progress, the progress in general. When we did Emmanuel, for example, we did Emmanuel in Hong Kong and in Paris, and we shot Hong Kong on LED screen, and we did everything in studio in Paris, inside the hotel, with the Hong Kong streets at the window. So the technology allows us also to make a lot of different things we couldn't do before. But I think what the actors look, I mean, in the independent world, because it's a bit different with the studio, but they look for a good director and a good experience and a good film. And then if you need to travel for that, you travel.
So, I mean, to end it up, but we were just talking about the last Showgirl, which you worked on, and I think you worked on. So, looking at like green shoots, not green shoots, but like positive examples. I mean, you were talking about the financing of that film. It's a small film, but I'm not sure how big the box office was. You gave me some figures. We were just chatting.
I think it made $7 million at box office, but it was made for about $2.1 million. And I think that the movie was already recouped before the film started shooting. Don't contradict me.
No, I would have liked to fully finance the film, and you told me it's too good business for you, so you went to some other clients, and it was fully financed by equity, but just through the pre-sales, we were financed, and the film sold after very well and did very well. It's a perfect example. We can still do low-budget film in the US, because the film was shot in Las Vegas, at a budget that I'm sure we couldn't do it in Europe. So it's a good example of that, how low budget are still possible, even if I know it's tougher. But it was a very profitable film, and even if we worked for a very small commission for CAA, we're still happy.
So I think we have to wrap there. But thank you so much for all of your insights. So Hollywood isn't dead.
It's not dead.
No. Every single time we come to one of these summits, there's always a question. What part of the movie industry or television industry is dead? And I feel like the whole point is that we're always trying to be malleable.
Right.
Anyway, thank you very much for your comments and all your insights. It's been really interesting. Thank you.